Thank you so much for listening. For more information on how to grow your business, visit our website at 4dglobalinc.com. That's the number 4, the letter D as in David, global, globalinc.com. Click on the Owners Academy tab for more videos on sales, marketing, operations, and leadership. If you are in the healthcare space and would like to learn more about how to get started with an employee in India or how to start a risk-free free trial with 4D Global, click on the Get Started for Free button on our website to book a time with someone on our team. See you next time. Hi, Brenda. I'm so excited to have you on our podcast today. Brenda McGuire is a global entrepreneur. She's a cultural business expert and a #1 best-selling author known as the Global Gal. She has worked with thousands of people in over 50 countries to achieve their global business and travel goals. Brenda is the founder and CEO of Worldwide Connect, which specializes in training international business professionals to work effectively across cultures, lead virtual teams, and conduct business globally. With hundreds of cross-cultural trainers and coaches on the ground in 6 continents, that's amazing. She and her team have helped busy executive, expats, global leaders, and multicultural teams to succeed in today's competitive global business environment. Brenda is also an avid globetrotter, which we'll talk about, having traveled to over 85 countries, lived in 6, and completed 3 world voyages. And she now shares her tips, trials, and lessons learned through her global travel and lifestyle coaching and training program. So if you want to go global, whether it's traveling the world, living and working abroad, or achieving a secret global goal, Brenda is going to share that information, some of that information with us today. Okay, Brenda, I'm excited to have this conversation with you. So this podcast is called Growing Global, and you're known as the Global Gal. So I think it's so appropriate for you to be on the show and share your wisdom with us. You came to me through one of your clients said you need to talk to her. Jane is running a Fortune 500 company, but living in India. And apparently she hired you and some of your trainers to help her navigate it. But I just think it's awesome. Give us a little bit of background as to how you got started with all this, and tell us about your beginnings of your travel, because I think it's super cool.
Well, thank you for having me on. Yes, I'm the Global Gal, but I wasn't always global. In fact, I grew up in rural Iowa. So picture this: cornfields, the countryside, nearest town, 1,000 people. So trust me, there was nothing crazy global going on in my world. But from a young age, I dreamed of traveling the world. Didn't know how I was going to make that happen. And then when I was a senior in high school, we had an exchange student from Norway. So all of a sudden, there's other cultures out there. And so I was wanting to learn more. And when I was in college, I did an exchange to Switzerland, and that again opened my worldview a little bit more. But when I was a senior, I did something that just changed my life forever. In fact, I wouldn't be here today. I did something called Semester at Sea, where you live on a ship for a semester. You sail around the world. It's a floating university. And so your professors come with you, and you spend a whole semester, 102 days at sea, going to 12 countries. So you can imagine, after going through that and then coming back to Iowa, you're, whoa, there is truly another amazing world. So I had the wanderlust, and then I was gone for 10 years traveling the world. I've now been to over 85 countries. I've lived in 6 countries. And so again, I continue to use the world as my classroom. But during that time, wow, I had a lot of cross-cultural challenges and issues and roadblocks, and I went through a lot. And so I came back to the US and I launched 2 international companies that actually help people on their global journeys. I help them to avoid some of the same mistakes I made, some of the same pain points, and some of the same issues. One is called Worldwide Connect, which we'll talk about later, that helps people to work globally. And the other is called Global Gals. That's more my passion, where I'm helping women to achieve their travel goals.
That's so wonderful. I love that story. But tell us about your initial stages. How did you get started? You're a kid out of college. Your world has been wide open now because you've seen so many different countries. How did you get started? Did you start reaching out to people? What were the first stages of that business?
Well, in terms of the cross-cultural journey and getting started with that piece of it, yeah, I had the personal where I traveled the world and had these experiences and worked globally. But then when I was in Japan, I lived in Japan for 2 years in Osaka. Moved there, didn't have a job, didn't know the language, didn't know anybody. And then I found myself working, training Japanese business executives from Nestle and Microsoft on how to do business globally with the United States, right? Well, this was 20 years ago, and this was very pivotal for my cross-cultural career. I was doing cross-cultural training, but didn't even know it. In fact, we didn't even know there was a whole field or industry out there to do cross-cultural. So while I was living in Japan, I went through a lot of my own cross-cultural challenges and hardships, frustrations. And a lot of it's because I didn't know what I didn't know. Yes, I was living in the culture, but I still didn't understand why. Why were things happening? Why was I doing this? So I was going through the journey. And then I was watching all these executives and business people flying into Japan and not taking 5 minutes to even learn how to do the simple Meiji business exchange. So because of that, I made it my life's mission and work to help other people to bridge those cultural gaps, because it didn't have to be that hard. I wish I would have had somebody to help train me and coach me when I moved to Japan. So that's why I ended up in the cross-cultural field, ended up doing my master's in Australia in that area, leading one of the world's largest intercultural training companies in New York. And now for the last 15 years have had my own company, Worldwide Connect.
That's so interesting that you first were training non-Americans how to work with Americans. Now you're training Americans on how to work with people around the globe. That's fascinating. So tell us about some of the aha moments you had, or some of the most common things that come up that you think people need to learn. Especially a lot of our listeners are doing business in India and the Philippines. And I've been, to India many times. And so over the last 15 years, every trip you learn a little bit more and you learn a little bit more. And I constantly put my foot in my mouth for sure. So I wish there was a handbook, but great that now you do that. But tell us some of the common misconceptions or misunderstandings when it comes to working specifically with those countries.
Yeah, so a lot of the time we don't know what we don't know, right? I think that's what gets us in trouble. So we put on our, think about, you have sunglasses, and so you have the American lens, and let's say you're going to picture yourself. Okay, pick any country. You've picked India and Philippines, but for your listeners, think about some country you're working with right now. I know we're in COVID times, but let's just say right now you can get on a plane tomorrow. You're headed to meet with one of your important clients and customers. Okay, this is a really big deal for your company, make or break. It's a big deal. Okay, so when you fly to that country, okay, you might watch 10 movies on the way. Are you even doing any homework or prep to know? Yeah, you think, oh, I need to know about my clients. But guess what? You're going to a country, and how they do business in the country is different. So you get there, your taxi takes you to your client's business. You walk through the door, and let's use India as an example. When you walk through that door, do you know how to say hello in the local culture? Do you know how to properly introduce yourself? Do you know how to build trust and relationship with them? Are you aware that should you be using direct or indirect eye contact? Because again, that could get you in trouble. What's the appropriate dress or attire you should be wearing? What's their communication style? Should you be communicating directly or indirectly? How about your body language? Did you some cultures, when you do the okay, right now people might be horrified that I'm doing that, but in our culture, yeah, it means okay, good. But in some, it's offensive, right? So we need to be aware of these things. I'm not saying that's the case in India, and lastly, women, okay, what things do we need to know as we're engaging in some of these cultures? So what we do is we help people to understand what they're missing, to bridge those cultural gaps. How do they flex their leadership style? Because the worst thing they can do is spend all that time on trying to acquire that client or customer, and then they don't even take the time to really understand how to build the communication or how to connect with their client or customer, or more importantly, how is business done? Because every country has different ways of doing business.
So what tips would you have for someone that is working globally? I'm about to get on the plane, right? And I'm on the
Yep.
plane. Instead of watching the movies, what
Mhm.
what research should we do? Or obviously we need to contact you and you'll give
Yeah,
us the
right,
whole
right. That's
thing.
part of it. Right, right.
But for someone that hasn't gone through your training,
Yep.
what would you recommend that they do to prepare themselves for interacting with, because you're right, it's the driver, it's the hotel concierge, it's the belt, right? Some people don't want you to shake their hand, especially if you're a woman, right? And then there's different ways of greeting people. But what would you say are some of the things to really hone in on or study?
Well, I say the 3 C's. So if you think about this, cross-cultural awareness. Okay, what is the culture like? What are the do's and don'ts? Okay, cultural do's, and you can just Google those, right? You got the information. More importantly, yeah, we'd rather you contact us to do a half day, full day training program, do some one-on-one coaching, those types of things. But again, knowing the culture that you're going to be going to, right? And there's books out there, there's resources, there's websites. Secondly, communication is key. So what you're going to see when you go to places in Asia, let's say China, India, and Japan, they are indirect communicators, where the US is very direct communicating. We're to the point, right? We don't beat around the bush. But in many cultures in Asia, the ones you're India, the Philippines, they're indirect. It's not what they're saying, it's what they don't say. You have to read between the lines. In fact, in Japan, there's a quote, if you can't read the air, then you're not a good listener. So it's not what they're saying, it's their body language, it's their tone, it's even how they shake their head, it's how they are communicating non-verbally. And that's where, as Americans, we're not used to that. So we miss it. They don't say anything, but they're saying a million things, right? By doing that. And I would say lastly, connections is key, especially if you're going to places, India and the Philippines, South America, Middle East, Asia. It's about relationship building. So connections, right? So I have a company called Worldwide Connect, and that's what we do. But Americans are super, super transactional. Let's get on the plane, get the business done. Let's not take time to really get to know the culture, ask about the family. And in some cultures, they won't do business with you unless you understand get to know them personally versus just trying to dive right into business, which is what I watch a lot of Americans make mistakes. Let me give you an example. We were working with an HR team, a Fortune 500 one, where we trained their folks in the US, and these are HR people, so they're more connection oriented anyway, right? To do business in the US and to do business in Santiago, Chile. And what was coming out of it is they felt, their American team, the Chileans, said, when my colleagues treat me, I'm a human doing versus a human being. And that was an aha moment for them, because they're, wow, we thought we were being very nice and respectful or punctual or on time. We get on the calls, we get down to business, but in the meantime, they were sending the message they didn't care about them as a human being. And many, many cultures, especially India and the Philippines, get to know your clients, get to know them on a personal level. I was just in India myself, well, before the world shut down in February, and I went and had dinner with my clients. And to this day, now I have a much better relationship. So I think that would be one key point. I love the quote by Richard Branson, succeeding in business is all about making connections. So if you're not taking the time to make a connection and learn, then that's going to trip you up. So I think those are 3 quick key points that you can do.
That's really great. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about all the different ways I've probably violated these rules over the years, because yeah, I mean, sometimes the indirect communication and reading the body language, sometimes I will talk and there would be absolute silence. And I'm like, why isn't anyone saying anything?
But they're communicating to you. You just don't know how the nonverbal, how they're communicating to you.
Yeah. Sure.
But also too, it's respectful, because let's look at India a little bit, because I know a lot of you and your listeners look at India. India is a much more hierarchical culture. So the US is more egalitarian, right? And so what does that mean? Well, when we start talking about etiquette, protocol, leadership style, using last names, being respectful in that, right? You wouldn't jump ahead. So let me give you an example of communication with the hierarchical. We were training this HR team again, and we work now with their team in Pune in India. And they said, okay, the team in India kept saying, gosh, they're always bringing things to their bosses and their leaders, and we feel demoralized, we feel frustrated, we don't know why they're always escalating everything to the boss. And the people in the US they scratch their head, they're like, what are you talking about? Come to find out, they were just CCing their boss. It's just protocol, hey, FYI. But when they did that, they were sending an unintended message to their team members, and they didn't want to work with them anymore. They were demoralized, they were frustrated. And so these people in India, they didn't understand the US culture. And so it works both ways, not just we need to know about them, but we train people in India all the time to understand how to work with the Americans, not just the Americans, the Japanese, the Germans, all of them, but understanding that when they just copied as CC, it was just as a kind acknowledgement, respect. But that was getting misinterpreted. So that was one area. Indians are much more indirect communicators. You mentioned that, right? They're more group oriented, right? So we in the US are I culture, I, me, my. It's always about the individual. But in many cultures, India and the Philippines are group oriented. It's about the we, it's about the group. They work together. And so you don't want to embarrass them and make somebody stand out and embarrass them as an individual. It's about the group. So those are a few key takeaways. So
I love that. And it's true. They really are they want to see them succeed as a group. And even when you walk, this is what was shocking to me also in India. I was watching people in the mall, two guys would have their arms around each other. And I said to my friend, whoever I was with, I said, are they gay? What's going on? And they're like, no, this is how two guys, friends, hang out. They're holding hands, their arms around each other. They're very into brotherhood and having that. I see it a lot in my leadership team as well, just a lot of bonding and group togetherness and working together as a team. So I think it's a really, really great point. Let's talk about today. What trends are you seeing in today's global workforce? Because look, our life is changing quicker than we thought. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I'm seeing many trends, but I'm going to say 3 for today. First of all, working remotely is here to stay. We know that, but I feel like it's been a forced experiment. Now, 20 years ago, my team and I went virtual. So I had an office, Park Avenue, New York, shut it down because of cost. And guess what? My team was global anyway. My clients were global. It didn't matter. So I've had this laptop lifestyle. I ran 2 international businesses, right? It doesn't matter where, right? At any given moment. Nobody knows I'm in Des Moines, Iowa today, right? You wouldn't know that unless I told you, right? So, but all of a sudden we have this forced experiment that we're all going through. And so think about, we've been working in the information and gig economy, but guess what? Now we're in a new economy, working from home economy. And we hadn't thought about that, right? Well, Stanford said that right now, 42% of people are working full-time from home. And that's double than the amount of people who are actually working in the office environment, right? HR executive website, they said 86% of organizations will continue to have some sort of work from home after the pandemic, and 59% will offer a flex schedule. So don't you think that's kind of interesting? Is that your experience too?
Yeah, for sure. I see now more than ever, our business has grown tremendously through COVID, just because I think people realize that I don't need to, it's really the same thing. If somebody is working from home a few miles away from the office, having somebody work a few hundred, 1,000 miles away, it doesn't really matter, because the world is getting a lot smaller. And with all the technology that we have with WhatsApp and Marco Polo and Voxer, I mean, these are very instant ways of communicating. Obviously email for sure, but we have so many pieces of technology now that keep us really connected. And I think it's wonderful, because there's so much talent across this world that we really can tap into. So why not?
Yeah,
I think,
absolutely.
yeah. But
Yeah,
tell me about
in fact, just kind of related to that, then because of that, we're going to start seeing a virtual talent war. That's what I think. So what's going to happen now, and I've already been, I said, I have my company, Worldwide Connect. We have hundreds of trainers and coaches in over 40, 50 countries around the globe. So I work in a global virtual world every day, and I hire the best in the world. They don't have to be in Des Moines, Iowa. I don't really care. Right before I jumped on this, I got a request from somebody in the United Kingdom. Their client wants some help support going the business in Iraq. I have a trainer who specializes in the Middle East, based in London, and now we're going to partner together to help this company going into Iraq. All from Des Moines, Iowa, right? So it doesn't really matter. But because of that, the virtual talent war, companies are going to start saying, oh, well, I don't have to hire somebody in my backyard. Oh, I can look at talent other places. Now that's good and bad. if you're not keeping up with being your own career and being globally minded, well, guess what? You're going to be left behind. But for those who are really open to that, really, you can find the best talents anywhere in the world. And I would say one follow-up question to that is, what are you doing to attract, not just you, but your client, everybody listening on here, what are you doing to attract, recruit, and retain your top talent?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very powerful what you're saying, that everyone has to up their skill level, because they're not just competing with their local salespeople or whatever it is. They have to really look at the global talent that's out there and try to stay at the top. So either it's through continuing education or reading or whatever it is, that's really important.
And by the way, sorry for you go on with that. Forbes actually just did a survey. They had 9 skills that are going to be needed. Can you guess what maybe one of them is from your perspective?
Oh my gosh, skills that are going to be needed going forward:
Mm-hmm.
emotional intelligence, critical thinking. You tell me.
Yep. So they identified adaptability, flexibility, tech services, data literacy, critical thinking, digital coding and skills, leadership, AI, which is really important. So I guess the next question I'm going to ask your listeners is, what are you doing to develop your employees or yourself? Because what we're seeing is companies, things are going to get very competitive with talent, global talent worldwide on both sides, but you also are responsible. And so what I'm seeing now is people coming to me individually, where before I was working with companies and corporations and groups, but now people are saying, hey, Brenda, I want to talk to you. How do I develop my global career so I can be competitive? And also, too, we look at industries that are losing their whole industry is being decimated, the travel and hospitality industry right now. So these people, not only do they have to upskill, but they have to move into a different industry. And so we have a 5-part program, coaching program that we're helping people in the travel and hospitality move to a totally different industry.
What industries do you see really taking off right now during this COVID time?
I would say what I'm seeing in the global workforce of how COVID is impacting in general the global workforce. So I'm going to take it a little bit bigger than your question. I would say it's causing us to have, in the positive way, right? I want to say a positive way, reaching new markets, SMEs, entrepreneurs that maybe they wouldn't have had that opportunity even 6 months ago or even thought about it. I think this is an ideal time to go global, and also accelerating e-commerce. Speaking of India, the statistics show that in India, e-commerce sales are expected to go 2 times, from 68.4 billion in 2022 from 26 billion in 2018. So, I mean, things are accelerating very quickly. I mean, I'm seeing recruiting talent worldwide. We talked about it, educating the world. Now people have access to education and stuff that they wouldn't have had before. We're able to access online resources. And so it's kind of leveling the playing field. Technology is leveling the playing field. We talked about that, Zoom. Even being on this podcast, maybe a year ago, I wouldn't even have thought about something like this, right? So I feel we're getting knowledge as a global community, and what we choose to do with that can help us move forward in our businesses.
Absolutely. Okay, so we talked about what global professionals need to do to stay competitive. You mentioned AI. I think that's really important because technology is taking away a lot of jobs. And so upping our skill set in other areas to really do the things that computers and robots cannot do, I think is what's important for people to really look at as they continue their journeys and their careers. So tell us, we just have a few minutes, we're going to wrap this up, but what are some of the lessons that you've learned during your global career? What you've done is so, I don't think I've talked to anyone that's done this much travel and has this much experience, especially as a woman, right? It's a very different journey traveling this path in a male role and in a female role. And so I just want you to speak to that biggest lessons.
Well, you can imagine I've learned a lot of lessons, but I'd say one of them, it's small world, right? We know that, right? But that's been my mantra, my experience. I even have a website called Small World Stories, where I've met people on one continent and I've ran into them in another continent. And this is before internet kind of stuff, right? So I feel it's such a small world. In fact, I'm hoping to launch the Small World TV show soon to kind of shine a bright light on some cool stuff going on around the world and talking about travel and global business and things that people are doing inspiring. And the one thing about COVID is we're all in this together. We are all in, and that kind of leads me to the next. It's a globally connected world. We know that, right? We've known that, but I think now we see, okay, somebody sneezes here on one side of the world and then something happens over here. Or in Iowa, we had the derecho, terrible storms with the crops. Well, that affects somebody else in China. So we are such a globally connected world. And so that's why it's even more important to develop a global mindset. And then it's a cross-cultural world. I've talked a little bit about that, but again, making sure you understand the cultures that you're interacting with in business. And then lastly, on a positive, happy note, it's a kind-hearted world. So traveling as a woman, often by myself and moving to countries by myself, I will tell you, my experience is that people are very kind-hearted and helpful. I did not have any bad situations. I get so tired of the media around the world. It's this doom and gloom, dark world. That was not my experience. And I'm talking over 20 years of travel. I'm talking as a woman by myself. In fact, I think it worked to be a woman in my advantage in some cases, right? Some people would be more helpful. And two, there's women around the world. Half the world is women. So I would just ask another woman and they'd be, oh my gosh, she's my daughter or my granddaughter. Next thing they're inviting me into their house for tea or whatever. So I think sometimes we're blowing this is a doom and gloom world to no, I actually believe the opposite. I believe it is a kind-hearted world. So
I completely agree with you, Brenda. Absolutely. I've had a very similar experience. I going to different countries and being treated really well as a woman. And maybe it's because we're CEOs of companies and people respect that potentially. But I do think I never forget my first trip to India specifically. I remember in the airport, everyone was staring at me and I didn't understand why. And why are they looking at me? What's going on? And someone said to me, look, and I looked around and you're the only white face and female. And some of them have never seen a white female except for TV and movies. So to them, you're something different and you do stand out. But I think leveraging that and using that as a way to connect to people or make you yourself more approachable, I think is always really it always breaks the ice when you just come across as friendly and happy to see them and want to connect with them. So I think that's wonderful. Okay, I know you have some stuff going on and you are doing so many amazing things. I love your Global Gals. Talk to us a little bit about where people can find you and learn more about what you do and also different things that you're up to.
Sure. So if you're interested in how my company can help your company go global and bridge those cultural gaps, you can check out worldwideconnect.com and you can connect through an email through there with me. Also, our company was just in this past year in CEO magazine. And so there's articles on the website, being a global boss, how to lead across cultures, how to connect around the world. So those are complimentary. So you can find them at my website. And then you can also go to my personal website, brendamcguire.com. And on that website, I've got some of my best-selling books with Jack Canfield, and here's one with Richard Branson and so forth, so you can download the chapters there. And I would just say, finally, I do a lot of connections on LinkedIn. So you can just, Brenda McGuire, just send me a LinkedIn request. Hey, Brenda, I heard you on the podcast, or hey, I want to go global, or hey, I love to travel too. So I just love connecting with the world, obviously, so.
Thank you so much, Brenda, for sharing your global insights with us. And we look forward to continuing to follow your journey with all the things that you're involved with. So thank you so much, Brenda, for your time today.
Great. And thank you. And congrats to you for being a CEO in the world and working in places like India and making this world a better place too.
Oh, thanks, Brenda.
Hi, I'm Hani Gluck, and you are listening to Growing Global. I am passionate about helping entrepreneurs grow and scale their business. I've been an entrepreneur for over 2 decades. I built my own businesses, sold a business, and continue to leverage the global economy. Growing Global is about educating, inspiring, and motivating entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs on how to take yourself and your business to the next level.